Hey everyone, welcome to the very first episode of Ask Shane Anything. This is a chance for you guys to ask me questions, not just related to games, but to pretty much anything. Let's get to the questions. This one's from Peter Kavanaugh. Hey Shane, was just wondering your thoughts on the Atari Box. I wasn't around during the Atari Golden Age, but goddamn, the Atari Box looks like a beauty. I love all the work you're doing, and I hope SIFTD will continue for many years to come. Peter, I'm not buying the Atari Box. It's way too expensive. It's like $300. And here's the thing. I grew up during the Atari age. My first ever console, other than a Pong/Skeet console, was the Atari 2600. And so I have a lot of love and affinity for the Atari 2600. Unfortunately, when I go back to play those games, a lot of them just really don't hold up. Even the original stuff, the stuff that was created specifically for the Atari 2600, you go back and play those games now, they're not great. There's also been tons of Atari collections that have come out, so I have kind of disc versions of all those Atari games if I really want to play them. I think really the Atari Box is for people who have a lot of disposable income, who grew up in that period like I did and have a lot of nostalgia for it. Personally, I'm not buying it. Next question is from Thomas Duvac. Hi Shane, is there any publisher developer's model for developing and releasing games that you see as admirable? Is there any publisher or developer's model that you find not so admirable? Also, what's been the toughest things you've had to deal with when starting managing SIFTD? Keep up the great work. Thomas. We'll take these one at a time. So, I think the developer or publisher that I admire the most and how about it goes as business is Nintendo. And that's just because for me personally, the way it designs and develops games, it really appeals to what resonates with me with video games. I'm a big gameplay guy, so I really like games that have tight gameplay, that explore gameplay more than just story and sort of themes and things like that. So Nintendo has a leg up on that already, and admittedly, Nintendo is not at all good at those other things, but it is really good at gameplay. I think the other thing I like about Nintendo is the games are really polished. You don't have to deal with a lot of bugs or other issues. And the other thing, too, is that it's always gone for this quality over quantity mantra. Nintendo's games don't come out all that often, although they seem to be coming out a lot more often on Switch, and we'll see if that holds up. But Nintendo generally doesn't release a ton of games, and usually when you do get one, you know it's going to be something really good and something worth playing. So I admire how Nintendo takes the approach of, if we make the games good enough, the people will come. As far as publishers that I'm not a big fan of how they handle things, I don't know, I guess I would say Warner Brothers Interactive. Don't get me wrong, Warner Brothers has published a lot of great games that I really enjoyed. My big issue with Warner Brothers is that it doesn't really treat PC gamers with a lot of respect. It tends to think it can get its console games up and running on PC, and that's good enough, and it's really not good enough. PC gamers are some of the most discerning gamers in the entire industry, and I just feel like Warner Brothers has played with that a little bit too much, and it's kind of betrayed that group of players a lot. So I guess Warner Brothers would be my pick for a publisher where I don't necessarily agree with how they're going about their business. But in all honesty, fan feedback is so intense and immediate now that it's really hard to find publishers who screw up, because when they do screw up, they're called for it immediately, and they tend to fix things pretty quickly. And to answer your last question, what's been the toughest thing with starting and managing SIFTD? I would say managing the work and personal time. It continues to be a huge issue for me. Before I started my company, I think most people when they start their companies, they think that they're going to be a smashing success and it's going to be crazy, it's going to take off right away. I was no different. I really thought that, and it hasn't worked out that way. And so what you find yourself doing is working crazy hours trying to make the company a success, and that's what I've done for the last 3 years, really. All right, this one's from David Charon. How do you like your steak? Bonus points, what sauce do you like to have with it? I am a medium guy. I used to be medium rare. And what I found is that there's too much variance when restaurants cook it. Sometimes you get medium rare and it's way too rare and it literally feels like you're just eating raw meat. It's hard to get it right. If you don't like it, they have to send it back and either re-cook it and cook it some more or just start over and cook it from scratch, which means everybody's eating at the table except for you, and then your food comes out late and everyone's waiting for you to finish so they can leave the restaurant. So I just got tired of it. So I go medium, pick in the center. My favorite cut of steak is filet mignon. Used to be New York strip, although I'll eat tri-tip off a grill any day of the week. But now it's filet. Now that I'm a little older, I think about how much fat I'm putting into my body. Obviously, I'm not doing a very good job of it, but I try to watch how much fat I'm putting into my body, not necessarily for overweight concerns, but just for a healthy heart. One of my best friends just died of a heart attack, and so that's really hit home for me over the last couple of weeks. So I'm a filet mignon guy. As far as sauce is concerned, I've got a tip for you. This is my favorite steak sauce. It's called Virginia Gentleman's VG80 Bourbon Steak Sauce. It is absolutely amazing. It's hard to find. You can probably find it maybe on Amazon, but definitely from the official site. It's my favorite steak sauce. Another thing I want to say, though, is every time I go to a steakhouse, I make a point to get their house sauce to see how they want to serve their steak. And if they don't have a house sauce, maybe I get butter and garlic on top of my steak, but that's how I roll. Next up, Harley Boucher. Boucher? Hope I'm getting that right. What are your all-time favorite games in genre and your least favorite game in genre, and why? Man, well, I think picking a favorite game of all time is tough because, like any piece of entertainment, video games, some of them age well, some of them don't. So puzzle games, they're always going to age well. Technical limitations don't really hold them back all that much. But, I mean, I think when people ask me this, I typically say The Legend of Zelda Ocarina of Time. And I think that's because, for me, at least personally, that was kind of the first game that ushered in the modern era of the action-adventure game. There's so many elements in that game that have been propelled forward by dozens, hundreds, thousands of other developers. It created paradigms that video games have adhered to now for like 2 decades. So I think that is the game that hit me the hardest the first time I played it, just because it was so unique and so different, yet so right. So that's typically the game I say is my favorite game of all time. My favorite genre of all time, man, that's tough. It's changed. I was a big fan of first-person shooters for a while. I've kind of burnt out on those. I was a big fan of action adventures for a while, but those have kind of gone away. And so what I've kind of found myself settling on is the open-world action RPG. Skyrim, Fallout, Horizon Zero Dawn, all those types of games where you have an open world and it allows you to do a lot of different things. And what I like about them is that most of them allow you to do all the stuff I used to like in my favorite genres. So you can shoot, there's puzzle solving, there's crafting, there's looting. It's just, the action RPG has kind of become the all-in-one game, the natural evolution of the video game. And so I find myself playing those a lot and really enjoying those. As far as least favorite is concerned, I'm not really into simulations all that much, whether they be flight simulations or just life simulations like The Sims or city simulations. I think maybe my attention span isn't good enough to stick with those. And kind of the nature of what I do, you can't spend a ton of time on one game. You got to kind of keep playing and moving on. And those games require a ton of time and commitment from the player. So I don't get enough time to spend with those, and maybe that's why I don't like them, but that's probably my least favorite genre. Next up, Tim Lynch. During and after the transition to Patreon, you stated that you learned a lot since launching the site. What were some of the biggest mistakes that you made in the past regarding SIFTD that you would go back and correct if you could? Tim, a million things. I mean, SIFTD has pivoted so many times already. I mean, if you remember when we first launched, we were 100% subscription service. It was $30 a year for all original content, and then just $10 a year if you just want to be a part of the community. And that was, the idea of that was that it would make sure the community was full of adults and people who were committed to the community, and therefore a lot more grown up and mature. And here's the thing, it actually worked. I mean, still, the SIFTD community is probably one of the most mature gaming communities online. And it's a place where you can go to have civil discussion and civil discourse as well with other gamers who are just as passionate as you. So that part worked. Where that didn't work, though, is that it kept a lot of people from joining the site or even giving the site a chance, in all honesty. A lot of people just heard 100% subscription and ran away. And then the problem became messaging the changes of the site to all those people. So I think that was the biggest mistake we made right out of the gate. The basic subscription probably should have been free. We should have relied on our moderators more to make sure that they cleaned up the community instead of relying on a pay barrier to do it. So I feel like that's kind of put us behind the 8 ball right out of the gate, and I think that's probably the biggest regret I have with SIFTD, as I'm sitting here right now anyway. Who knows what comes in the future. The next one is from Scott Newberry, and Scott writes, about a year ago, after the tragic passing of your father and sister, you understandably went through a tough time of not wanting to play games. How have you and your family been doing, and has gaming continued to help you cope? Okay, so some of you who are patrons may not know this, but about a year ago, both my father and my sister died in a car accident. Just like that, half of my original family was gone. And I went through a period right after that where I had to run the business, and it was really tough. Because like I said earlier, you don't really get time off, no paid vacation, and if you do go away, people get angry. So I had to kind of work through the deaths of my father and my sister. It was really tough. And for a while there, it was hard to play games. Particularly violent games, driving games I had a lot of problems with. And it was interesting, I found kind of for me, the games that kind of shoehorned me back into it were mindless games. Like I played a lot of Civilization, I played a lot of League of Legends, stuff that kept your mind occupied 24/7, so you didn't have a minute to think about anything. Even cutscenes in games, when you're going through something like that, your mind can trail off really quickly. And so I just played kind of these mindless like MOBAs and RTSs and things like that, and that kind of got me slowly back into it. And thank you very much, by the way, for the words of condolence. So my family is doing pretty good. Anyone who's gone through a tragic death or multiple tragic deaths in the family, they'll know what I'm talking about here, and that it's a year of firsts after it happened. So it's the first birthday of that person. It's the first Father's Day. It's the first Thanksgiving. It's the first Christmas without them. And those are the hard things to get through. So now that we've made it past the first year, I'm hoping that things are a little better this year. And it is kind of funny how we arbitrarily assign grief to those milestones, but you know, I thought about that while I was going through it, and I still couldn't help it. You can't, it's hard to just blow off your sister's first birthday after she's passed away. So we're doing a lot better, I'll say that much. I still have my moments, and obviously I just went through another really tragic death with one of my best friends here like a week and a half ago. So it's been a really tough year and a half, plus with all the struggles I've had with SIFTD, and it's been a tough road, but I firmly believe, and it's a cliche, but I firmly believe that what doesn't kill you makes you stronger, and I've definitely put that to the test over the last like 18 months to 2 years. So I think we're doing better. As far as games are concerned, I'm pretty much back to where I can play all games now. Still extremely violent games, like I just played Wolfenstein 2, and there are a couple moments where I had to look away from the game when certain things happened. So I'm still not quite all the way back. I think maybe my regular media consumption has changed more than my game playing, though. I can't watch a lot of gore in movies. Like if I'm surfing YouTube and I come across like these near-death videos where they show people almost crashing or crashing, like I can't watch that stuff. So I think it may be part of it is just my age as well. I'm starting to mellow out, and I don't want as much violence in my entertainment. I don't know, but I've definitely kind of found myself softening a little bit on my tolerance for violence. It's just not where it was before. So I think with games, not so much. I'm kind of back to where I was with other entertainment. I am a little different now. And our last question comes from Kevin Rafa. What's up, Kevin? Kevin asks, if you could go back in time and tell young Shane to play a game that he or you had never played, what would it be? Oh, man. I don't know if I would pick one specific game, but I think in general, games I would like to play more are a lot of games on the Sega Genesis. So when I was growing up, I had a Super Nintendo. My best friend had a Sega Genesis. So I did play a ton of the really good Genesis games, but I don't kind of have that deep well of knowledge of the Genesis library that I would like to have. He was rich, at least according to me, he was rich when I was a kid. I was not. So he got a ton of games, and what we would do is we just switch systems every like few months or whatever. He'd keep my Super Nintendo, I'd keep his Genesis, and we'd play whatever games the other one had bought. And I definitely got the much better end of that deal, by the way, because he bought a lot more games than I did. But I think that's kind of one of the bigger holes in as far as like my bank of knowledge for retro gaming is probably Sega Genesis stuff. Like a lot of the more niche, like more cool stuff that some people talk about on podcasts, I haven't played it. So I think if there's one kind of era or platform or whatever that I could go back and do things over, I would probably buy a Genesis and just buy less games for the Super Nintendo. That's going to do it for Ask Shane Anything. As you can see by the questions we selected for the first episode, you can ask me questions about anything. Nothing is off limits as long as it's not too personal, but I think you saw by some of the questions I answered today that I'm willing to kind of go there as well. So we'll be asking for another round of questions here in the not too distant future. In the meantime, I literally have like 50 other questions. So this is the first episode. It definitely won't be the last. Expect another one real soon. Thanks for watching.